Is everybody having a great conference? I've had so much fun here. Learned so much. I hope I can continue that for you. And I will try to add to that. If I succeed, then we'll all be happy. Right? Especially my sister. Everybody know Melanie's my sister? All right. She is. Yeah. So here's a little bit about me. My first career choice was cowboy. I had some gun handling problems, so I had to change. Grew up in Jerome, Idaho, a small rural community, very little diversity. We pretty much all thought the same. And then one day I joined the military and left town, and I learned that that's not the case everywhere else. How I came to be here was, I thought I was going to be a carpenter and a construction guy my whole life. I grew up in my stepdad's business, doing restoration on houses that had been damaged by flood, fire, and rain and wind and all that stuff. And I enjoyed it. I liked the work. It was very seasonal. It wasn't really great for thinking about raising a family and, the stability. And so I started looking for another job. And I found this job in Section 8 housing, which I'd never heard of. And I interviewed for the job, and the woman asked me about my experiences with diverse cultures. And I didn't have very many stories, but I must have done a pretty good job because I got the job. And then I went out and I started to meet my clients, and I fell in love with them. They were so, well, the diversity was wonderful, but they were people that were accomplishing a lot with very little. I won't use the word grit because I learned that wasn't a great word, but it seemed like there was a lot to admire in my clients. And I also saw how the system often didn't take care of them. And so part of my job was to manage conflicts between a landlord and a tenant who see the world very differently, and bring them together. And I was supposed to arbitrate a decision on usually some kind of damages that had happened to a house. And what happened was I would tell them what they were going to do because I was an arbitrator. Now they told me what they thought was happening, and I'd say, here's what you're going to do. And nobody ever wanted to do it. Didn't matter, even if it sounded great, they didn't like it. At least one of them hated it, and one of them, because it wasn't their decision. So I'm complaining to my sister, who was at the University of Nebraska at the time, on the phone. I'm talking to her, and I'm telling her about my problem. Says, I'm coming in, telling these people these conflicts. She goes, well, Randy, I am taking mediation classes. I started them in Oregon, and here I am in Nebraska. I'm finishing. That's kind of something that's interested me. And let me tell you about mediation. And so the next 30 minutes on the phone, she taught me how to mediate. And I think you can learn a lot in 30 minutes in mediation if you just change a few things about the way you do things, how you communicate to people, and how you empower them to make their own decisions. And so I started doing that and letting them work out their problems, and I helped them do that. And the things that they came up with stuck. I saw landlords getting paid when they never got paid before. Their houses didn't stay empty for 2 months while they tried to find somebody else. And more importantly, people got to stay in the place where they were because that's where they were doing their best. And the last thing they needed was they have to pack up everything and move somewhere else. And so I did this for about a year, and my boss came to me and she goes, what are you doing? And I explained it to her. She goes, yeah, we don't do it that way. These decisions have to come from you. We sent you to school so you could make those decisions. And that's the way it has to be. I found out later that her best friend was the director in Billings, Montana. And whenever I had an appeal, which was several times a year, her friend from Montana had to fly down to do those hearings. And they weren't getting to spend much time together. And so I quit. So that doesn't make any sense, but man, mediation sounds pretty wonderful. Another reason I quit was my mother had died. And a very good friend of mine said, Randy, this is going to leave a hole in your life. And if you don't fill it with something, anything can fill it. So, and it'd probably be good if you filled it with something that would make your mother happy. And I thought, my mother always was so proud of my sister for her education. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get educated in conflict. So actually, my sister drives me to the college. And at the University of Boise State, we go in and I take my entrance exam. And they told me, wow, you're not stupid. They put me in the honors college, which changed my whole view of me. They said, you really need to sign up for honors classes. And I thought, wow, high school did pretty good for me. I didn't realize that. And so it changed the view of myself. And then I go into this school and I'm looking for mediation. They don't teach mediation. So what department do you go to learn mediation? Well, we went to the communication department because that's where my sister started. And it just so happened they were starting a mediation program. Not the communication department, but it was in the school. So I started taking classes in the university, started spending time working in the growing mediation program. And, excuse me. What I found next was every class I took was about conflict, humanities, English. So I think I got a multidisciplinary degree in conflict. Often my professors would go, why are you writing about conflict? This is because that's why I'm going to school. It's an important thing that educators didn't get, they resisted that. Why would you write about your own experience and the things you care about? Write about the things I care about. Our people in conflict are much the same. We got to meet them where they live and meet them at the things they care about. And so I have come to the conclusion that the best thing a mediator can do is let it go of everything they have before they walk in and take the most important thing from those people. And that is, what is driving them? What do they need? And how do they see what they're going to create or what they need to create? I went to graduate school and they said, you can go to graduate school, but we want you to teach. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I taught these classes and I thought, oh, this is so wonderful. One day I'm in front of a class and I said, this is like managing a conflict. My students are in a dispute with me. I want to hold them to a standard and they want me to be easy. And I have to convince them that they don't want me to be easy. I want them to do what I did, get something out of this that means something to you. And so I started doing the mediation stuff, asking students to tell their stories. And I brought those stories into the classroom and my evaluations went, the students were like, this is so relevant. Like I really got something out of it. So even though I didn't remain a cowboy, I've always wondered what would it be like if I'd stayed a cowboy? Sorry, wrong button. I'm missing a slide here. Huh. Oh, well. It was a picture of my face on the baby. Imagine that. If I could just put this face on that little cowboy. Not a good look. But I'm glad for the journey that brought me here. And one of the things I think that was most important that I learned in school was how meaning was important to the communication process. In humanities class, it was like people were trying to figure out, why do I exist? And what does it mean to be a person? And so I saw meaning as the core. So in communication, I found people that were talking about how we speak symbolically. And meaning is a construction that we do together. We create it together in interaction. And that's how we learn about our world. So we are constantly doing this. We're creating meaning about things. We see things. We probably in the beginning, it was, does that eat me or do I eat that? But then it became, as our lives get more complicated, our meanings become more complicated. We do this through an internal dialogue with ourselves as well as with our interaction with others. I know who I am because of the people that have been around me and what they have told me about myself. And how I hold up to those things that I keep inside of me that were important. So I'm always measuring myself against that. So not only am I creating the meaning of the world that's out there, I'm creating a meaning for who I am. And that's completely intertwined with everyone who's interacted with me in my past. My mother has been dead for many years now, and she's always telling me what to do. Right? Thank God for that. We call this act attribution. So you'll hear me use that word a lot. Attribution just means placing meaning to things. This is somewhere I sit, somewhere I stand. Sometimes it can be a ladder. So those meanings can be very diverse, depending on my experiences. We act towards things according to the meaning that we give them. I heard this in a class one day and I went, wow, that's a powerful thought. So whenever I see people act badly towards others, what meaning is driving that? So if we look at these pictures, can you imagine what type of meaning these people are putting into their world? Well, let's start with, I see a father and a son. And what do I know about fathers and sons? Anybody?
Teaching.
Okay, so parents love their children. I am. People love their children. They want them to respect them. They want to show respect to their children, usually. And so I look at this picture and I see a father. I imagine a father teaching his son something that's important to him. And giving life to a plant that might feed us someday or feed someone else. I look at the people here. I could tell different stories about them. I see business partners, maybe on a business trip, sitting in an airport or a conference area, working out what they're going to do or how they're going to succeed together. I see they have a good relationship, possibly. What about the man at the bottom?
He looks chill.
Yeah, he looks very thoughtful.
Chill, yes.
Right. When I saw this, my first thought was, this is the guy at the end of a day of hard work, and he's thinking about what he accomplished and what tomorrow is going to be like. I see him imagining. Yeah, Karen. Okay, I saw thoughtfulness. Karen sees concern.
The man who that father is from Cuba, and he lives in the country, and like throws.
I'm going to ask you to say that again into the microphone because it's too good and it's too long for me to repeat.
So the man in the picture, he looks just like my husband's father, and they're from Cuban countryside. And it's like I bet that picture must have been taken in Cuba, because like he's smoking the cigar and I think he's not really thinking about much. He's just having a break. Because they work quite hard in the countryside, like taking care of the fields and the animals and everything, and to feed the family.
Mhm.
And yeah, he's just having a break, smoking his cigar and chilling.
So who's right? We don't know. But the thing is, we're driven to find meaning. I look at a picture, I have to put a story to it. Because I'm driven to understand it. I want to understand my world. We are driven to reduce uncertainty in the world, and that means that we have to make guesses often because we don't have all the information. All I have is an image. So can you think of a time when you have made an attribution about someone and then suddenly something happened when you had to change it? All right, that new information came in. Anybody want to share one? Microphone. Oh, you would have to jump into her lap with the microphone.
Can you hear me? Is it okay? I made the terrible assumption, and we just talked about this in an equity session yesterday, that a Spanish family, a Hispanic family that did not have a lot of interaction with the school, that they needed a translator. So I went and did all the, had a translator come in, so on and so forth, and they spoke English perfectly fine. And so I felt very, I thought I was being proactive, and instead I should have found that information out first.
So how did that feel?
Not good.
Right. Change like that is sometimes painful. In fact, most oftentimes a little painful for us. Makes us a little uncomfortable, especially when it means we have to change something within ourselves, right? Admit that there was a gap between the way we should be and how we want to be, right? Karen?
Hello. Hello. Oh, anyway, so this was 2011, and I just landed in the United States at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, to go to grad school. I'm in this graduate complex, but I'm surrounded by frat houses. And that those big benches all the frat kids sit on. And I decided, I have to do an ethnography. So I had this assumption of all these frat kids. They were like tall, white, blonde hair, and good looking, and they were thin and athletic. And I had this assumption of just party kids from privileged backgrounds. And then I just went up with a bunch of, I heard that donuts are really good for America. Americans love donuts. So I took a bunch of Krispy Kreme donuts and to these frat kids, and I said, can I do an ethnography? And this one kid said, I'd love to. And then we arranged an appointment, and he came running up to me the next day and told me his story. And he was a gay young man that had to struggle through that, and had to struggle to kind of be accepted in society, and how he really wants to make a difference in the world. And actually had a lot of pain and struggle he had to go through to get where he is. And I just totally changed my perception of frat boys. Like, no, you're a sweet man that really wants to make a difference in the world. And you've changed my whole perception of these frat culture.
Right.
So I love that.
So you had to admit to yourself, boy, I got it wrong. I made a mistake. Right. What I learned to call this was cognitive dissonance. That's when cognitive elements in our head just don't line up. So these cognitive elements, things like beliefs and attitudes, our past behaviors, our current behaviors, ideas that we have about the world, all those things, we like them to be consistent. This is called consistency theory. When I was sitting in this class, it had nothing to do with conflict, and they started talking about this. I went, "This is it. Consistency. People need consistency, and when it happens, it." Well, let me give you a quote that I love. William Carlos Williams said that dissonance, and then in parentheses, he said, "If you're interested," causes change. That's pretty close to what he said. And I thought, what are we doing in a mediation? Helping people with conflict. We're trying to help them change. And that change can be uncomfortable. And sometimes we have to make them uncomfortable a little bit. But we can also make it easier, right? I am a set things down and lose it. So if I go, anybody see where I put the clicker? That's one of my attributions about myself, and it's been well backed up. So here's a story, two teenagers. She gets a ticket to a concert. She works at a radio station, so she gets a backstage pass where her boyfriend only has a regular ticket. She wants to go backstage and meet some rock stars. And he says, first he doesn't like it, but then he goes, "Oh yeah, go. I want you to go." She goes back there and she says, "Oh, 5-10 minutes." And she's back there an hour. He waits outside for her, not sure if she dished him or if she's left town with some rocker, right? She comes back and she is excited. And she explains to him how wonderful it was. She got this interview and she got to touch his guitar, and he's upset. You can see the anger on his face, or well, not so much anger, but upset and angst that he has. And then he says something kind of mean, and she says something mean back. So what attributions do you think Eric and Donna made about each other? Microphone again, if somebody raises their hand. That led to that reaction because they applied meaning to each other and then they acted towards that meaning. I should have kept one up here and I'd be halfway.
I would guess that Eric probably felt insecure and maybe betrayed, left out, that kind of stuff.
That's very good. If you ever watched 70s shows, Eric's character was insecurity. He was very unsure in the world. So yeah, his insecurity, he imagined all these terrible things that were happening, and she's not honoring our relationship. She comes back and tells him, "Hey, I'm so happy and these wonderful things happen." What does she expect? So that creates a dissonance also when our expectations are met. I come back expecting you to join me in my joy and you don't, and that's devastating. Because I don't know what that means for us in the future. Which would be more change, it's going to make it worse. Right? What are Eric and Donna's likely attributions about their own behavior? I'll let you go twice.
She is probably thinking like, I could never pass this up. Why would I pass this up even though I really like you or love you or whatever? I can't pass this opportunity up. So be happy for me. And so she might feel I don't want to say indoctrinated, like she deserves to go because it's a once in a lifetime thing. So that's her.
And she's going to be a rock star when she gets back to the radio station because she got an interview with this great rock guy. And so this creates a lot of uncertainty in both of them. But let's characterize what happened, the difference between the two behaviors or the two attributions. What do you see? Anybody? Okay, so there's a difference in how each attribution places the power or the power to judge, right? What else? Who does my oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, it's kind of
Oh, thank you.
it maybe the gender roles, as that there's maybe a little bit of disconnect in gender roles as a couple.
Or the context of the 70s, especially,
Right. That's what I was thinking of. the
right? Back
era.
before women could borrow money without a man's signature.
Right.
It was a world. So there was an assumed power in the attributions that we know society holds. Going against those can create dissonance also. I'm not doing what everybody else says. My world is not most people's worlds, which I'm sure your clients feel that one quite often. Oh,
I was just kept thinking, they're only thinking of their own interest.
here we go.
They're
I-
not thinking of anyone else's interest, just their own. And it's really seems self-serving.
Self-serving bias is what we call that. Yeah, we make attributions that are going to make us happy, or we think are going to make us happy. Sometimes those are even decisions that we wonder, why in the hell would you make that decision? It's not going to make you happy. But it avoids dissonance. If I can keep things the same and all my cognitive elements stay the way they are, I'm probably going to be happier. So I want to avoid those abrupt slam on the brakes and everything changes for me. All right, that's good. So we call these internal and external attributions. An internal attribution says things like, they did this. It's in them. This is your fault. External attributions. This was a difficult situation. It's external to me. It was beyond my control. There was nothing you could do about this. And that kind of saves us. Right? I yelled at my child, but I'd had a really hard day. And, I'm 99% of the time I'm good. So I'm a good parent, right? I don't feel any need to really change it. It's just normal. Every once in a while, you don't do things right. It's like I heard earlier today, we can't take care of every child. That's an external attribution. It's not, we just don't care enough to take care of that child, which is somebody else is making that attribution, right? And so that's driving your clients right there, that motive that I've got to look good, that I'm doing okay with what I've got, because that's an important part of your story that you want to carry with you. I'm doing a good job. Now, granted, there are people who do this differently, and they're going to counseling, trying to figure out why do I think in ways that drive me crazy? But if we look out for ourselves, and this bias is actually there to help us feel good about ourselves. Now, how many people believe in evolution? Now, I find it amazing that this had to evolve in people. I imagine there was some cognitive dissonance, for people who had very simple lives where it was, I just got to find food and eat and get through the day. And they didn't have all the other pressures that we have civilized ourselves into, right? So that bias evolved to protect us in a world that we are constantly in conflict with and trying to find our place in it. So this is when bad things happen. Let's look at what attributions we make when good things happen. Oh, push the right button. So when good things happen, I tend to make internal attributions like this was me. I made this happen. I have what it takes. They did or they earned this. It's in them. Right? External attributions. They didn't do this. They didn't play fair. They won by cheating. Excuse me. So one of the key causes of attribution is that attribution error, but we have some others. For example, similarity. We attribute similar meaning to similar things. Kieran had a good example. I meet people, they look like this is what they're like. These people are like that. Right? I put policemen up there because we have a lot of societal defining. What is it? What is a policeman? And they're not communicating about it. I hear the defund police, and people are going, no, we need police because law and order keeps us safe. And I don't think those people are that far apart, because defund police people are not telling the police to go away. They're just saying, you need help because you've got things that you are being asked to do that you're not equipped for. And I wish they had changed it to let's refund the police or let's support the police, because that's really what they're talking about. And it'd be really hard to argue with the let's support the police. I think the other side would say, yeah, let's talk about how that can happen. Okay. Consistency. Once we make an attribution, it's hard to change. I decide you're a good or a bad person. That is going to filter all my future attributions. Because I want to feel like I was right. And that's what, we heard that yesterday in a workshop. Somebody said, have you ever had somebody come up and say, if I was going to give you, or I have a way we can make $10 million in 3 weeks, but it's a person you do not trust? Your immediate answer is, no, I don't want anything to do with that. I saw a early study where a man was standing on the street with $100 bills going, hey, I'd like to give you some money. And he's dressed like a unhoused person. Or maybe somebody who is struggling. And so that doesn't work in their schema, the story that they tell of what kind of people would give me money. Not that guy, there's something bad. And very few people took the $100 because he would have given it to them if they'd asked. He put on a suit and he stood on the corner. I'd like to give you $100. Thanks. Because that fits in with my past attributions. All right. We already talked about self-serving bias. Social influence. We're influenced by groups. Politics. Doesn't matter what you say. I only care who you are. And whatever you say, I'll support it. Right. Golden halo. We do this for ourselves, of course, but we extend this to other people. This is just the self-serving bias. If you want to see it, criticize somebody's child. And you will see dissonance, right? Not my kid. Once I think you're okay, that's going to, I want to see that continue. Plus, I want to protect you because you're in my circle. And the rusty halo we talked about, having a negative bias against somebody. Causality. We often attribute cause to things that are close together. They are linked in cause. Can I expand the picture? Oh yeah, it's a dog sitting in a torn up pillow is the way I see it. And he's smiling. I have a dog that looks about like that, so I love that big smile. So I would experience a little dissonance. I'd go, oh, dang it. Oh, but you're so cute. So I'd have to resolve that. You know, if I was standing in the grocery store one day and all the oranges rolled out onto the floor, and I know every person around looked at me like I did it. I didn't touch them, I swear. I'd have a hard time convincing them that I didn't. Right? And then premature judgment. Uncertainty reduction is a theory that's out there. Theories, sometimes when you say theory, you see people's eyes glaze over because theories aren't necessarily true. But what a theory does is it gives us a perspective, a way to look at things. Okay. So uncertainty reduction is one where they tell us that humans have a need to reduce uncertainty. We need to predict. And that drives us to rush to judgment many times. And that premature judgment can cause us to make attribution errors. The cartoon that you're looking at, a woman walks into the lineup and she says to the policeman, "Number one looks good enough." Right? Probably not a good judgment. Right? I really have a hard time with this left and right on the button. So consistency and prediction. Having our actions and our thoughts be consistent with each other is the consistency. And then prediction. We need to make predictions. In fact, we will sit and imagine a scenario we're going into. And how can I go into this scenario and come out looking like my best self? How are people going to see me? I've been to the conference for 2 days. First day I put on a suit. Not my preferred thing to wear, but I did it because I thought that might help meet your expectations. It shows you I cared enough about you to present myself in my best way to you, right? So we imagine scenarios, we imagine interactions, we plan what we're going to say. We often get there and things don't turn out the way we expected, but that's an important driver of behavior. So here's one of the things that I do in conflict engagement is I want to ask questions that get behind these two things. What kind of question could let's say we have a couple of people who are, let's go back to Donna and Eric. What could I ask them to uncover their attributions?
How did it make you feel when the other person?
Yeah, what did it feel like? Okay. What emotions were attached to your behavior? What else?
Now I was thinking, what were you thinking before the situation happened that was going to happen? What was Eric thinking that she was doing there when she was there such a long time and so on? So he started thinking in his insecurity, inventing stories and so on. And what was she thinking? Did she even think about how it's going to make him feel? Does she really know him well enough to realize that he's insecure, that if she stays there for an hour with somebody that he thinks is much better than him, what he's going to think, how it's going to make him feel?
Mm-hmm. Because he sat there and he imagined that, right? There we go.
What was their agreement?
What kind of discussion did you have before you went back?
They agreed to.
Right, because they didn't really talk a lot before it happened, and that probably the preparation for the you're going to go see the rock star. The expectations weren't, she said, oh, maybe 5-10 minutes. I'll just run back there, but then something happened and it changed. What if she had said, Eric, I'm going to go back there for 5 or 10 minutes, but if I get an interview, it might be longer. And if I get this interview, it's really going to be great for my job, and I'm going to be so happy. If they'd had that discussion, it probably would have changed this because it would have changed their expectations. Right now, it's in the possibility of things, and I've thought about it and I've thought it through, and I know how I'm going to act when you get back. I get to plan it instead of react. I'm going to push this button and I hope it works out.
Could you explain the middle box?
Oh, I missed this one. I did this to create a little dissonance in you. Now, I know my sister, when I put it up there, she went, oh man, something's wrong here, immediate dissonance. And then if I push the right button, no, of course not. Right. Then we feel better. A small example of the dissonance that we feel sometimes. Right. Last week, I was in a store and I picked up some audio equipment, $700. Man, this is beautiful. It's on sale. I really should buy this. And I started to walk away. And I immediately knew something was going on inside. So I turn around and I set it down. And I start to walk away and I go, wait a minute. And I pick it up and I walk away again. And then first thing I thought, I'm experiencing dissonance. Something isn't lining up. And I thought about it. And I had been going through some bills and I made some plans with some money. And if I do this, it's not going to fit with that plan I have. What amazes me is I didn't think through that. I just felt the dissonance. My brain was taking care of going, whoa, wait a minute. What are you doing, Randy? Things aren't lining up. And so it protected me from making that mistake. Right? I'll probably buy it one of these days, but just not right now. I can still get it. Wonder if I held it this way. You betcha.
I just want to share. Does it work?
Oh, give her that microphone.
Okay. I just wanted to disclose, this made me realize something and I just wanted to share it. This last week, I do intakes on people's problems. And this woman is having problems with her child. And I was told that she had disabilities herself, particularly autism. And she sent me something in writing. And the writing was so poor. There was no periods. There were many misspelled words. And I caught myself being irritated with her. And it was like, that dissonance of that discrepancy with the language. And I had to catch myself and say, well, of course, this woman's got problems. We need to help her. But for a moment, as I was reading it, I was like, oh, it was just really weird how that language, when I saw that, that's what it made me think of. Because at the time I even thought, well, that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. So how many of you empathize with unhoused people? So I do. I believe I do. I empathize with them. I can put myself in their shoes, and I've been close. I've had times where there wasn't much money and I ate a lot of peanut butter, right? But I've never been without a house. I've always had a place to live, but I can imagine what that would be like. I've talked to people and I can use those experiences to help myself empathize. So I think I'm pretty good. Yesterday, I went to walk over to Walmart and there was an unhoused person on the bridge I had to walk by. And I was nervous. And I had to check myself. And so I stopped and talked to him for a second. How's it going? A little exchange. And then I felt better as I walked away. I'm glad I did it because that was about this. How I view myself is so important. So when things don't agree with our self-view, I think that's where we experience huge dissonance. We think of, let's talk about the political angst that we're having in this country. Someone can say something they believe and someone else wants to attack them for it. I need to put you down and make you insubstantial because your views are an anathema to everything that I think is true and right. That's protecting our self-concept, self-esteem, which makes up our self-view. The story we would tell about ourselves and who we are And self-esteem is the value we put on that. Now, we're human and it can be complicated. Not all self-concepts are something that people would say is good. In fact, it might be, I'm a great thief. I can look people in the eye and tell them anything and make them believe it. And then I can get in their pocket and take it. And I'm really good at it. And my experiences tell me that that's true. And I even have people who make me feel good about that. All right. So it doesn't necessarily have to make us a better person in the view of the world, but it makes us a better person in our view of the world. Right. Okay, attribution. I did it. I pushed the right button. So in others, what we're looking for is positive reflected appraisal that supports our self-view. I have, I taught at the university level for 20 years. And there were times I would stand up in front of my class and they didn't care about anything I had to say, and I could see it in their faces. Was it because I wasn't interesting and dynamic? No, I got a class full of deadbeats. Right. Because I have to attach meaning to that reflected appraisal, and I'm going to use my self-serving bias. So here's some nonverbal reflected appraisal. If you have teenagers, you've seen them all. So we interpret the way people respond to us and imagine what they think of us with varying degrees of accuracy. Right? We develop feelings about those and we respond to them. Those perceived judgments, because we really don't know what they are. And then we imagine how we will appear to others in social situations so we can do impression management. So a lot of our behavior is someone trying to, or us trying to manage what people are going to get back to us. And your people in conflict are doing this very same thing with each other and you. They want to get good reflective appraisal, which is a great thing because we can use that to help them make good choices. So here's a question. In conflict, what concerns should we have about reflected appraisal? So I'm managing reflected appraisal. I'm looking at what you are doing back to me, and I'm trying to manage that. How can that go awry? You bet. Different cultures have different nonverbals. They use language differently. I got to spend a day with Cornel West. And I was his handler, and we brought him to the university to speak. And his talk was amazing. And after the conference was over, one of the people I went to school with, because I can't believe an educated man would say ask. Why didn't they learn that out of him? That's what he said. Why didn't they learn them out of him? And I said, well, who taught you to talk like that? Learn that out of them? I don't know if that's good English.
Randy, not everybody knows who Cornel West is.
Oh, Cornel West? Well, maybe one of his most famous things is he was in The Matrix. But no, he is a wonderful professor in cultural studies and the real way he talks about race and the way he breaks down the barriers and the way he talks. He is just a fascinating person. I would suggest you read anything he's written. You will grow. If you could spend a day with him, it's the most amazing thing in the world. As a white person who I'd met my first Black person when I was 14. So my culture didn't have much diversity. I guess we had two cultures. We had Hispanics and whites. Hispanics worked on farms and we were the city folks. Right. It was very friendly. I mean, I had very good friends. I mean, I didn't feel like there was a lot of judgment at that, but there were, I learned later, a lot of roles that were imposed on people that limited their ability to change their stories. Right. Well, one of the things that my time with Cornell West is he made me feel so much easier about race and talking about it because it was a scary thing. I was afraid to say Black people because that might offend somebody. Because people like to be called different things. And we had a conversation about that. And he said, well, why would you do that? I'm Black, aren't I? You're my white brother. I'm your Black brother. We're going to go see a room full of brown and red and yellow people. And I experienced a little dissonance there because he's saying things that we weren't supposed to say. But he talked about color like it wasn't important. It's just the way we are. It's like tall people, short people, people in coats, people in without them. It's just not, it's just a wrapping. What's important is what's inside, and that's all the same. Okay, we have a comment?
I just wanted to share. I just wanted to share that linguistically saying ax and saying ask, it's actually like linguistically correct to do that. And there is some sort of a cultural spin to it with Southern American English and Black vernacular English. But we do it all the time with all kinds of words where we swap two consonants in the middle of a word. And I can't think of another example right now, which is killing me. But we do it all the time. And I don't know, I just think it's so interesting that that one particular word always comes up as like the word that we judge, but we do it all the time in English. It's just like using they, them pronouns. We do that all the time in English. So thank you for.
That's what every time I say cement, she goes, there's Idaho. It's cement.
Cement. Cement is what he said, cement.
Right. They'll tell you it's wrong. That's not how you say that.
Concrete.
So I'm going to go back to the question about what could be concerned about in reflected appraisal. One of the things is we could be completely wrong because it doesn't always mean what we think it's going to mean. A serious face, a happy face, that resting uninterested face that some people have. Even when my students aren't paying attention, from my perspective, I really don't know that they're not. Right. So we do have to be aware that we make errors. You sometimes need to withhold judgment, and that many times we're wrong. But I think what's more important is this is a place where we can ask questions, because this is where we've drawn meaning, and this is really what I think we want to get to when we're with people in engagement, is we want to find out where those meanings came from. And we're in this activity called a mediation or a conflict engagement, where we are unpacking all this information. What's the value of fleshing out all those attributions? I'll just say it. We get to know that person. We know things about them that we don't get from a look or trying to decode their world from my point of view. That we can facilitate a discussion about those things that really reveal them. And so we are asking questions that facilitate self-disclosure. Self-disclosure builds relationships. How many people do you know who said, I didn't like my spouse when I met them, but we spent time together, I got to know them, and my attributions changed. They don't say that, but that's what I hear, right? And so we can use reflective appraisal as a tool because we can manage it as a conflict professional. What does it mean? What led you to, was there anything you saw that you didn't really, that you had to maybe guess? You know, sometimes we can make it normal to make mistakes, to read reflected appraisal wrong, because we are not perfect. So I can explain. In fact, I have told stories about my own bad reflected appraisal. to help them see how normal it is. I'm your mediator, I'm a professional, and I do it. It happens. When you get bad reflected appraisal, that's where you should be curious, not judgmental. It's like, oh, did I say something that it seems like you were interested, or that was something that upset you, or maybe there's something I can explain. As a professional, I can do that for the people in front of me as well. So managing, think about your questions and the things that you're doing with these people. If you look at it through the lens of managing their reactions to each other and trying to bring them to as true a place as possible, where they're really communicating and sharing meaning instead of just creating their own disparate meanings. I think I got it down now. And then we come to this thing called signification. When my sister speaks, I listen. She's one of the most significant people to me in my life. I'm going to make her cry. The level of significance we place on any one thing affects the power that we give it to influence us. And the reverse is true as well. The lower the significance we have, it's easier for us to just ignore that information. And the higher that significance is, the more that appraisal matters to us, and the more we will work to create and make adjustments to get that appraisal. We work harder to manage the impressions of those who hold the highest significance, and we lower significance in others to mitigate the sting of their disapproval. And I know we can all imagine a time that this has happened, where something has changed, and sorry, I'm checking my time. Doing pretty good. And so I look at this mother and child and the signification that this daughter is placing upon a mother. I'm reading your nonverbals. Is there something you can't see?
I thought it was a boy.
Oh,
Didn't matter.
well, it doesn't matter. And the, you know, you can just see the importance they hold for each other, right? And you can see, in fact, this is one of the things that I look for in mediation is changes in signification. I'll ask that question. Do you have any different feelings about the person than you did a half hour ago? This is important in my next workshop, is that's giving people reward. Here's something you gained. You have some new ways of seeing the other person. And I don't explain all the theory behind it, but I know it helps them feel better, because now they can add that into their appraisal of the other person, and they will feel like they're being more, or they have a better chance of doing so accurately. Oh, I picked it up upside down. There we go. So this is a little attribution appraisal model. We have two people here in a communication event. They're interacting. And in the normal communication model, they draw these two circles. They say messages are going back and forth constantly. Verbal, nonverbal channels. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We have these thoughts, these cognitive elements that we want to keep aligned up that are going. So we're making attributions about each other. We are adjusting the signification of the other, okay? Making changes based on the attributions that we're making. You know, if my boss comes in and looks angry, I can say, "Oh, this isn't a good boss," and so it'll change the way I take the message that's coming from that person. And then we're making constant thoughts about the appraisal and the message. And then our self-concept and self-esteem come in. How does this support or in communication circles, we call this confirmation or disconfirmation of my self-concept. If they disconfirm it, I want to manage that. If they confirm it, I'm happy. So, oh, you're making me feel so good about myself. Now, as a mediator, I come into this mix. And there's a lot going on here. We got 4 bubbles for each person that they're managing. I bring a mediator into the mix, that jumps to 22 bubbles. Right, I did the math, I worked it out. You can trust me on that. I didn't put them up here because it wouldn't make any sense because it would just be too crowded. But now you're in an IEP meeting. How much is going on? A lot. Right. Now, the good news is I really don't have to think about this, because what I really want to think about is reflected appraisal. People need consistency. And then all I want to do is bring that all out into the open, because that's going to create understanding. I have a firm belief that in the end of everything, we're going to find ourselves closer together, more alike than we are different, right? Because a lot of our motives are the same. When I sit and I ask somebody a question like, well, what did you expect to have happen? Or I do a validation and I say, you were really worried about your child, weren't you? And they go, oh yeah, it was, you know, they tell the story about what they were afraid was going to happen to their child and how they didn't feel like there was a lot of things they could do for it. What is the other person doing on the other side? Are they relating to it? And when someone says they care about your child, you relate to that, right? Because most of us do. Excuse me. Oh. You have the good microphone? Oh, okay. Thank you.
I was thinking as you were talking about the signification, that also not only what that thing or a person signifies to us makes us you know, change the way that we deal with them, or but also the way that what it signifies to somebody else. It also, so if we are on a team, for example, doing the IEP or IFSP, whatnot, and the parent comes there and, you know, and there's one person that we respect that has a certain opinion on that parent, let's say, or somebody else who is new that we don't necessarily know, we also tend to shape our beliefs of that person, you know, by the beliefs of that other person that we respect. And sometimes we can be mistaken in a really big way.
Sure.
Yeah.
So for example, I could be sitting next to a colleague who I know holds certain feelings and ideas, and I want to live up to theirs too, because I want to look good to them. Right.
I know, I hope I'm not like going too much away from the topic or something, but it reminded me, like, I watched a documentary about cats, and they were showing this precisely like with a fan, where when the person, the cat's owner acts scary around the fan, the cat will be scared of it. But if the person acts in a very positive way about the fan, like, oh, look at the fan, how great it is, the cat will like go and explore. That it just influences us. Like, so certain parts of our brains work the same as certain parts of the cat's brain, right? As you were talking about the evolution and all that. So, yeah, so those things that affect those animals and so on, they affect us as well.
Yeah. And so groups and people who are significant, we can adopt their biases. We can play to their needs. And because they're more significant maybe to us than the other person over here. Sometimes we have to be aware how the people around us influence our behavior. So one of the things that I built this model for is this is a place where we can form questions and inquiry that we can ask people to reveal.
I was just wondering what the effects of trauma are in attribution and appraisal, like how that enters into the.
Well, I'm disclaimer, I'm not an expert on trauma. But I can go back to my own experiences. In trauma, these things can change greatly, is what I think. Attributions about yourself and others can go out the window. Your view of yourself, it could trauma is not a normal thing for us. And so there's going to be a lot of dissonance just from the trauma. So I kind of see that as it's like a blender going on inside of us. And we are grasping for something to hold on to, right? And so I think that we cannot, we have to be more open to looking at what's going on. And it's going to be hard to predict how they're going to react to it. But I think this is a place where we can ground them. You know, if we bring them back into these consistent ways that we operate, like our need for consistency. I know that trauma throws consistency out the window, right? So maybe talking and guiding people into a place where they can maybe start reducing that uncertainty and trauma. You know, predict what we can, deal with the rest, right, as it comes. Again, not a trauma specialist, but we do have, well, I'll go ahead and say this. As a mediator, I don't do therapy on purpose. I was in a class where we did a lot about talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. And I sat there and went, wow, I'm kind of doing cognitive behavioral therapy in a mediation. We're talking things out. We're going back to where's this rooted and where did it come from? And how does it affect me? And what are my experiences in that? And it's just that that is a road of self-discovery with yourself. And it's not much different than what we do between two people. They are discovering each other in our conflict engagement. So I'd like you to think about at your table, just a simple conflict between two people who see the world different, like a parent and a teacher, or a administrator and a PTI, or you know, the state and the school, and a conflict, whatever you want, it doesn't matter. And I would like you to imagine them in a conflict and you're helping them. What questions can you ask them to help uncover these things? I'd like you to come up with maybe 2 or 3 at your table. If you don't have a table, find one, or 2's enough. All right. What I'd like to do is go around the room and have some people tell about their experience. Give us a brief description of the conflict, who it is, and maybe what the conflict is, but then I want to hear some of these questions. We'll start with this table right here. You set yourself up. Oh, yes, you do need a microphone. Thank you.
Okay, I always lose the card draw and have to talk, even though it's not.
Wait a
my
minute.
favorite pastime.
Is that the mic that works?
I think it works for the people online. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So the scenario we picked, is that what you want, sort of the story behind it?
Yeah, brief.
Okay, is actually kind of based on a facilitation I currently have where some of the background information is that there's a lot of distrust between a parent and a member of the IEP team, but it's based on previous experience at a different school. And so so all of this going on is based on two people getting to know each other and using previous ideas about the roles that these two people have to form a relationship, and it's not going so well. So one of the questions that I thought of, and then you actually have to do something, or a way to start it, would to just be asking right up front, either one or the other, but probably the parent, to just talk about the experience of moving to a new school and just put that on the table right away, that this is a new experience, and make it part of the conversation instead of just focusing on the past.
The other one was talking about how do you like, what's your communication style to receive information? So that trust could obviously be formed. And then the other thing we came up with was just at the start of the meeting, allow the teacher to share insights that they've gained through knowing the kid for whatever amount of time about how amazing they are and what they know about them as a learner.
Mhm. So let me ask you, is it normal for most of you to pre-interview before a mediation or a conflict engagement? Talk to everybody who's involved individually? Okay. But always the parent, always the decision maker, right? All right, I'll take that. Often in the, not in the mediation, but the pre-mediation, I will ask people, who's someone that you have an easy time communicating with? And that'll help me get a sense of that style. You know, I'll ask them, what are your expectations in the mediation that's coming up? Is there anything you're worried about? Right? Because they're not only going to tell me what they would like to have happen in the mediation, they're going to tell me something about themselves. Right? So it's going to make me better at reading their attributions. And what kind of meaning are they placing on this? That was good. I'm going to need this. Who's next? Volunteer. I'm going to volunteer here somebody because I really liked what you said.
No, actually, we were talking, we came up with a scenario, and it would be like test taking. If there was an accommodation, let's say, well, I'll just make this up, but the child would be in a separate room when they took a test. And so somehow the parent is thinking the school's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the school can't understand what the parent is talking about. You can't start your questions with, okay, what do you want to say? What's your self-concept about this? Or how is this affecting your self-esteem? Or what is your appraisal? What do you think that person is? Why do you think they're acting this way towards you? So you just try and take the basic question. The basic question is test, accommodations, and figure out what it is. And I mean, I've had this come up, and I'm sure other people have too, where the parent, there's an accommodation for the child to take tests, and the parent thinks every single test the child's going to have in a separate room. But actually the accommodation is either about the state test, or the child has problems in reading. And so in reading, they get it, but in math, they don't get it. And maybe the child is taught to advocate for themselves. So they're going up when they realize they don't have a separate room, they're going up to the teacher, whatever, and saying this, and their teacher's blowing them off, and the parent thinks the teacher hates the child. And it's comes down to not understanding basically what her issue is even.
Mhm. So when I was, is there anybody else who wanted to share?
Our scenario was a child being sent on homebound because they have significant behavioral problems. And the school principal or the superintendent, if it's small, is not wanting to bring in behavioral services. And if I do the intake on the case, Missy might mediate it. But they're usually what they're thinking is, she doesn't understand, we can't afford that. This kid is making our environment unsafe. It triggers their appraisal of, I would ask them, they've done everything they can do. There sometimes is resentment. And they have to, and she and I have kind of the same role where I have to be the mean one, not the mean one, but I'm the one who's saying, well, you got to focus on the child. The State Department's looking very closely at homebound placement as constructive suspensions, and then give them resources like the signification of others. If they aren't listening to where the rules are for this, I'll refer them to an attorney that I know will support it for the schools. I have to assess all those kind of things in my concepts with them. And so when it gets to the mediation, I give them a lot of resources and I'm the one who tells them where those boundaries are. But then when they get in the mediation, the parent is usually feeling they don't care about my son. They're not willing to help him. He's got all these problems and they don't understand him. They don't know what they're doing. And really, there's a lot of truth in that,
They just want to be understood.
Yes, and I'm just begging. Yeah.
Okay, so when I was a mediator, a new mediator, I was taught this model. We set the stage, intake, get our room ready. We get them into storytelling, right? Tell their story. We go to the problem solving part of the mediation, and then we either resolve or we don't. And so this is where I focused because I thought this is where it happens. This is where it's gonna come to an end. And so for my first 100 mediations, I struggled. And then I made a fundamental change. Because one day I had a mediation where they started storytelling and it ended right there. And I'd thankfully just taken a class from a gentleman and he had said, a good mediator knows when to get out of the way. Part of my self-concept, I'm a good mediator. And I said, here's an opportunity to get out of the way. Right? And I did, and they resolved it. And so the fundamental change I made was, this is where it happens. If this is done right, this will happen. And I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think of the solution. So many of my baby mediators, I don't see the solution. I'd say, then stop looking for it. Look at your people. Get to know them. Help them get to know each other. And then, how many people, did you have a little difficulty? How do I get a question to get to somebody's attributions? It's hard here when you're in front of them and they're telling their stories. It's easy because they say something. I say, oh, that's interesting. How did you come to that conclusion? Now I'm not intruding, trying to dig into their brain like a psychiatrist. I'm just an interested person who cares about them, right? So I know you'll have access to this slide if we don't get to cover it in the next 3 minutes. But we've reached the end. Come on, change. Why isn't it changing? There we go. So this is where I believe the rubber hits the road. Integration. If we can integrate these people. So I am no longer a problem solver. I am a weaver of stories. I weave stories together. I make sure the important parts are connected. I make sure that the people are represented in those stories and that they see each other. This is where we find commonality. This is where we create self-disclosure. And that's going to build the trust that we need. And that's going to motivate them to do more because it feels good when you're integrated. When we're communicating, we're solving problems. That's really the story of our existence. We begin solving problems around 7 or 8 months. Right? We start changing our behavior so I can get that reaction from my parent. Hey, when I make this face, Dad goes crazy. That's why I could look at my son and go, mean look, Rob, and he'd go, and everybody would laugh and he would get the, oh, I did it. Right. And he saw the pride in my face that he did it. So if we can do these things, we're going to build empathy between people because it's hard to not like somebody you know. And I'm going to sit in the storytelling phase of the mediation. One of the things that I can do, I can be a good integrated partner. And if my other person's not doing it, I can weave my story into theirs and they see this and they're going to be compelled to do the same because they've placed some signification in me because they've hired me. They've agreed to sit down in front of me and let me be the person who brings them to this place where resolution can happen. And I can use that. I can be the good listener and model that behavior for the other person, and it's going to bring their need up to that level. So I hope this perspective helps you make choices and look at your own way of doing things and maybe develop some new ways to approach your mediations. All right. Thank you so much for listening to me.